Some of the most important Star Wars artifacts were never sold, never auctioned, and never meant to leave studio control.
I am your father.
These objects shaped the films, defined the characters, and influenced cinema history, yet remain largely unseen by the public. What follows are the most valuable Star Wars items known to exist that have never been sold publicly. And stay with me until the very end, because the final piece on this list might be the most surprising of them all. Ralph McQuarrie Original Darth Vader Concept Helmet. Before Darth Vader became the most recognizable villain in cinema history, he existed only as concept art. Ralph McQuarrie's early paintings established the dark, armored figure that would define Star Wars.
He's all yours, bounty hunter. Reset the chamber for Skywalker.
And this helmet is the first time that vision was translated into something physical. Built in 1976 during early pre-production, it was never intended for filming. Its purpose was practical. The production team needed to understand how McQuarrie's dramatic silhouette would function in real space, how tall the dome should feel, how the mask would sit on an actor, how light would strike the surface under studio conditions. The differences from the final helmet are immediate. The dome is taller and more cylindrical. The facial proportions are slightly elongated. The detailing feels experimental, almost unfinished. Certain lines are exaggerated, others less refined. It captures a character still in development. Studying this prototype led directly to refinements. The mouth grill geometry was tightened. The dome flare was reshaped. The integration between helmet and chest armor was improved to create a more imposing presence. This object represents the turning point where Darth Vader stopped being an illustration and became a physical reality. It never appeared on screen. It wasn't cataloged for collectors. It survived simply because it was part of the design process. And most pieces like this from the 1970s did not. If the true origin of Darth Vader's iconic look ever emerged onto the open market, the bidding wouldn't creep upward slowly. It would move fast, well past $3 million. Original 5-foot Millennium Falcon filming miniature. When audiences watched the Millennium Falcon outrun Star Destroyers in A New Hope, what made it believable wasn't computer graphics. It was this, a 5-foot-long physical miniature built by Industrial Light and Magic in 1976. This was the hero filming model, constructed large enough to withstand extreme close-up photography. At that scale, light behaved naturally across the hull. Shadows settled into the surface details. The ship felt heavy, mechanical, real. Smaller models simply couldn't achieve that level of realism. The surface was built using kit bashing, thousands of parts taken from commercial model kits. Aircraft panels, tank components, naval pieces, industrial fragments, all cut apart and layered by hand. Nothing about the Falcon is symmetrical. The asymmetry gave it character. It looked like a ship that had been repaired, modified, and flown for decades. This specific miniature finalized the Falcon's defining features: the offset cockpit, the forward mandibles, the circular sensor dish, the dense plating across the hull. Every later version of the Falcon, including digital recreations decades later, traces its design lineage back to this model. During filming, it was mounted to motion control rigs and photographed in multiple passes for engine glow, laser fire, and lighting composites. Over time, it developed chipped paint, subtle repairs, and stress marks, details that match original production stills and confirm its authenticity. Most visual effects miniatures from the 1970s were dismantled once filming ended. This one wasn't. It remained under studio control and has never entered the collector market. If the exact object that defined the most recognizable spaceship in film history ever surfaced publicly, the conversation wouldn't start in the low millions. It would climb beyond $5 million. Original Industrial Light and Magic Hero X-Wing filming miniature. The Death Star trench run is one of the most influential action sequences ever filmed, and the realism of that scene depended on this. An original hero-scale X-Wing miniature built by Industrial Light and Magic for A New Hope. This wasn't a background model. Hero miniatures were larger, heavier, and far more detailed because they were filmed at close range under intense lighting. Panel lines had to hold up, paint texture had to feel authentic, weathering had to look like real combat wear, not decoration. The model was constructed around a solid internal armature so it could be mounted repeatedly on motion control rigs. That allowed the camera to perform identical passes, one for beauty lighting, one for engine glow, one for laser fire, all later composited into the final shot. Precision was critical. Even slight instability would break the illusion of scale. Surface detailing came from extensive kit bashing. Aircraft parts, armor components, mechanical fragments were cut down and layered across the fuselage and engines. Each X-wing ended up with unique weathering patterns, scorch marks, chipped paint, oil streaks, which later became key identifiers when matching models to specific frames of the film. This particular hero miniature was used during close-up trench run photography. The speed, the weight, the sense of danger, it all depended on how convincingly this physical object moved through the camera frame, and after production, many models were damaged or discarded. Very few hero miniatures survived intact. This one did, and it has never entered public auction. And if one of the exact starfighters that helped define blockbuster visual effects ever became available, it wouldn't sit quietly in a catalog. It would push past $4 million. Original Darth Vader chest armor from The Empire Strikes Back. Darth Vader's helmet draws the eye, but the chest armor is what gives him presence. It's what makes him feel immovable, mechanical, dominant, and this is an original production-made chest armor component worn during the filming of The Empire Strikes Back. By the time the second film entered production, the Vader suit had been refined from its earlier version in A New Hope. The armor was subtly reshaped to appear more polished and imposing. Edges were cleaner, contours were more controlled. The finish reflected light differently under studio conditions, giving Vader a heavier, more authoritative silhouette on screen. This piece was vacuum formed and reinforced to maintain structure during filming while still allowing limited movement. It had to withstand repeated handling, costume changes, and long shooting days under hot lights. Minor scuffs and surface stress marks developed over time, and those imperfections are now part of its authenticity, matching behind-the-scenes photography from the 1979 production. Unlike many costume elements that were broken down or repurposed after filming, this armor remained intact. It was not reconstructed from parts. It was not altered for later productions. It survived as a single continuous artifact from the era when Vader became more than a villain. He became a cultural icon. This is the armor worn during some of the saga's most pivotal moments, including confrontations with Luke Skywalker that reshaped the entire narrative of the trilogy. If an original Empire-era Vader armor component like this ever entered the market, the bidding wouldn't reflect just costume value. It would reflect legacy, landing somewhere around $2.5 million. The original Obi-Wan Kenobi lightsaber prop from A New Hope. Long before lightsabers became the defining symbol of the franchise, there was the original Obi-Wan Kenobi hero prop built for A New Hope. It wasn't engineered from scratch as a futuristic weapon. It began as a real-world object, a vintage gray flex camera flash handle. The prop department modified it by adding custom grips, emitter details, and internal fittings, transforming an everyday tool into something mythic. That practical construction gave the saber weight and texture. When Alec Guinness held it on screen, it felt real, because it was. At this stage in production, the design wasn't standardized. Grip placement, balance, and detailing were still being refined. This piece represents the earliest physical blueprint for what a Jedi weapon would become. Every lightsaber that followed, from Luke's to Rey's, evolved from the design language established here. It was used during scenes aboard the Millennium Falcon and during the Death Star duel with Darth Vader. Because the glowing blade was added later in post-production, the prop had to carry the performance on its own. Its proportions, metallic finish, and balance made the illusion work. Visible handling marks and small surface imperfections align with behind-the-scenes imagery from 1976, reinforcing its status as a true production hero prop rather than a later reproduction. This is not just a collectible weapon, it is the first on-screen Jedi lightsaber, the object that introduced one of cinema's most iconic elements. If the saber that started it all ever crossed into the open market, the bidding wouldn't hesitate. It would ignite somewhere around $3 million. Original aluminum R2D2 dome from A New Hope.
I'm not sure that's such a good idea. It's a very long...
Before R2D2 became one of the most beloved characters in film history, he was an engineering problem. The production needed a droid that could move, rotate, light up, and interact physically with actors, and this aluminum dome was the solution. Unlike later fiberglass versions, this early dome was fabricated from metal. The aluminum construction allowed internal mounting points for motors, wiring, and lighting elements. It gave the head durability and structure, especially during early experimentation when the mechanics were still being tested. The surface detailing is sharper and more hand-finished than later domes. Panel lines feel less standardized. Rivet placement and construction tolerances reveal the fast-paced, problem-solving nature of the 1976 production. You can see the trial and error in the craftsmanship. This dome was used during early filming before the production transitioned to lighter materials for practicality. Because of that, very few aluminum versions were ever built, and even fewer survived intact. Most were modified, replaced, or dismantled once fiberglass proved easier to manage. Material analysis and production photography link this dome directly to the original film period. The thickness of the aluminum, the interior mounting points, and the finish all align with documented builds from A New Hope. It never entered the collector circuit. It never appeared at auction. It remained outside the commercial memorabilia market. This is the earliest physical version of R2-D2's most recognizable feature, the head that defined his silhouette from the very beginning. If the metal dome that introduced the galaxy's most loyal droid ever surfaced publicly, it wouldn't be priced like a secondary character prop. It would command something in the range of $2 million. Original Yoda puppet from The Empire Strikes Back. Before digital characters dominated cinema, there was this. A fully practical puppet that had to convince audiences a 2-foot-tall alien was wise, ancient, and emotionally complex. This is the original Yoda performance puppet constructed for The Empire Strikes Back. Not a replica, not a display version. The primary on-set puppet used to bring the character to life on Dagobah. Built with foam latex skin over a mechanical internal structure, it was engineered for subtle expression. The eyes could move independently. The eyelids blinked. The mouth articulated with nuance. Brow tension could shift mid-performance. Frank Oz operated the face and voice while additional puppeteers controlled body movement, creating a fully interactive character in real time. The sculpt was deliberately asymmetrical. Wrinkles were exaggerated to hold shadow under studio lighting. The ears were angled to create silhouette impact in close-up shots. Every feature was designed not just for appearance, but for performance. During filming, the puppet endured constant handling. Heat from lights, physical manipulation, and long shooting days created natural wear. Tiny surface cracks in the latex, subtle discoloration in the fabric robe. Those imperfections align with production stills and confirm its authenticity. Yoda wasn't enhanced digitally. He existed physically in the scene, allowing actors to respond to him naturally. That tangible presence is part of why the character feels so emotionally grounded decades later. Most practical effects pieces from that era were dismantled once filming wrapped. This one wasn't. It was preserved, recognized early as something culturally significant. If the exact puppet that delivered Do or Do Not, There Is No Try ever entered the open market, it wouldn't trade quietly between collectors. It would move into the realm of $4 million. Original Boba Fett prototype costume from The Empire Strikes Back. Before Boba Fett became a cultural phenomenon, his look was still being tested. This is the original prototype costume created during pre-production, a working build assembled to define the character before the final version appeared on screen. At this stage, nothing was fully locked in. The armor plates were adapted from modified Stormtrooper components. The helmet featured early paintwork and insignia placement that differ from the finished design. The jetpack was bulkier and less refined, built more to establish silhouette than screen functionality. The color scheme was still evolving. Weathering was minimal compared to the heavily distressed look fans recognize today. Certain details feel transitional. You can see where ideas were being explored, adjusted, and refined. This costume was used internally for approval, presentation, and early promotional photography before Boba Fett's official film debut. It played a role in generating early excitement around the character, particularly through marketing and toy development, even though it was not the final on-screen suit. After the definitive costume was completed, this prototype was retired rather than dismantled. Its existence is documented through production images and analysis of construction techniques unique to the late 1970s build process. It represents the moment a secondary character's visual identity was being shaped, long before he became one of the most recognizable figures in the entire saga. If the original developmental suit of the galaxy's most famous bounty hunter ever reached public sale, it wouldn't be treated as just an early draft. It would land somewhere around $3.5 million. Original Emperor Palpatine throne from Return of the Jedi. In the final act of the original trilogy, power isn't represented by armies or weapons, it's represented by a chair. This is the original Emperor Palpatine throne constructed for the Death Star throne room scenes in Return of the Jedi. Stark, angular, severe, unlike elaborate science fiction set pieces, it was intentionally minimal. Its height and rigid geometry were designed to frame the Emperor as immovable, elevated not just physically, but symbolically. Built from wood and composite materials, the throne was finished in dark tones to absorb light rather than reflect it. Under studio conditions, it created a sharp silhouette against the massive window overlooking space. The proportions were carefully chosen so that even while seated, the Emperor appeared dominant and untouchable. This throne is present during some of the saga's most defining moments: Luke Skywalker's confrontation with Vader, the Emperor's manipulation, and the fall of the Sith. It is the physical center of the trilogy's climax. Every major decision in that sequence unfolds from this seat. Large set pieces from that era were often dismantled after filming. Space was needed, budgets were tight, survival was not guaranteed. The fact that this throne remained intact is unusual in itself. Production wear, from repositioning and stage use, aligns with behind-the-scenes imagery from 1982. Its dimensions and construction methods match original documentation from the set build. This isn't a handheld prop. It's a symbol of absolute power within the Star Wars universe, the literal seat from which the Emperor attempted to control the galaxy. If the throne that witnessed the fall of Darth Vader ever appeared at auction, the figure attached to it wouldn't be modest. It would sit in the range of $2 million. Original Darth Vader meditation chamber helmet from The Empire Strikes Back. There's only one moment in the original trilogy where Darth Vader is seen without his mask fully sealed, and it happens inside the meditation chamber. This helmet was built specifically for that sequence. Unlike the standard Vader helmet, this version had to function mechanically on camera. The dome and faceplate were engineered as separate components so the mask could be lowered into place, revealing Anakin Skywalker's scarred head beneath. The construction is different from the primary filming helmets. The interior was modified to allow clearance without the usual internal padding. The exterior finish had to match the standard helmet perfectly so audiences would never notice the technical differences. It's a specialized piece built for a single unforgettable purpose. The meditation chamber scene changed how audiences viewed Vader. For the first time, he appeared vulnerable, dependent on machinery, isolated, human beneath the armor. That emotional shift hinged on this object functioning flawlessly under studio lighting and camera scrutiny. Subtle handling marks and finish variations align with production stills from 1980. Because this helmet served such a specific narrative function, it was not reused in later productions. It remained a standalone artifact tied directly to that scene. This isn't just another Vader helmet, it's the version that exposed the man inside the machine. If the exact helmet used to reveal that vulnerability ever reached the open market, the number attached to it wouldn't be conservative. It would approach $2.5 million. Original carbonite Han Solo mold from The Empire Strikes Back. When Han Solo is lowered into carbonite, the image is unforgettable. But what made that moment possible wasn't just the finished wall prop, it was this. This is the original production mold used to create the carbonite slab. A life cast taken directly from Harrison Ford to capture exact facial contours, body tension, and expression before the freezing sequence was filmed. Unlike the final carbonite wall, this was never meant to be seen on camera. It was a functional studio tool built to produce castings that would appear solid, heavy, and eerily realistic under dramatic lighting. The precision of the facial detail, the compression of the clothing, even the tension in the hands all originate from this mold. Because it was a working production asset, preservation was never guaranteed. Molds are typically discarded once their job is complete. They're messy, industrial, temporary by design. The survival of an original mold from a 1979 production is rare in itself. Dimensions and surface texture align exactly with the final on-screen carbonite prop. The anatomical detail matches frame captures from the freezing sequence and later scenes in Jabba's palace. This object represents the unseen craftsmanship behind one of the saga's most emotional turning points. Without it, the carbonite moment would not have had the same physical weight or haunting realism. If the original mold that captured Han Solo in his final pre-carbonite form ever entered public sale, it wouldn't be valued like a background artifact. It would sit around $1.5 million. Original screen-used Luke Skywalker hero lightsaber from The Empire Strikes Back. When Luke Skywalker ignites his lightsaber on Hoth and later faces Darth Vader on Cloud City, the weapon in his hand isn't just a prop. It represents the passing of legacy, the growth of a hero, and one of the most pivotal confrontations in film history. This is an original hero lightsaber constructed for The Empire Strikes Back. Unlike stunt versions made from lightweight materials, hero sabers were built with metal components and practical detailing so they would hold up under close-up photography. The hilt had to look convincing in tight shots, reflect light correctly, and feel substantial in the actor's grip. The design evolved from Obi-Wan's earlier saber, but introduced refinements that made it distinctly Luke's. The control box placement, grip configuration, and emitter detailing were adjusted for balance and visual clarity on camera. This is the weapon seen during the duel that culminates in the revelation that reshaped the entire saga. Production wear is visible in the metal finish, small handling marks, light abrasions consistent with filming conditions, and repeated use during choreography. These details match production documentation and screen captures from 1980. Hero lightsabers from the original trilogy are among the most sought-after film props in existence. Very few survived intact. Even fewer remain outside the collector market. This isn't just a Jedi weapon, it's the saber present during the words, "I am your father." If the exact hilt used in that confrontation ever reached the open market, the bidding wouldn't remain restrained. It would rise beyond $3 million.